Cool. I believe I recognize some non-users here, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to introduce Deepnote notebook. Some of you will already recognize this and you'll know this very well, so I won't spend that much time on it. But for those of you who haven't used Deepnote before, this is a good chance just to get up to speed. So right, again, who is this for? This is for some of you who already used Deepnote. This is the first time we're doing this, and we're going to show you some of the new features here. And the point is just, we'll try to do this every few weeks just so you're aware of the new changes and you know how to kind of maximize and leverage these new features. It's also for newcomers who haven't used Deepnote before, for you to hopefully get more excited about Deepnote and sign up. And finally, for team leaders to, to see how you can leverage a whole data science team on Deepnote and to maximize your productivity of your data science team. Right, so let's get started with what Deepnote is. Again, I won't spend too much time. If you're curious and you want to know more, feel free to reach out, and I'm always happy to hop on a call and demo it further. Deepnote is a browser-based data science notebook. So here, the first thing I need to do is I can just open up in my browser. I'm already logged in. And here I see a dashboard with all these different projects that I can work on. I already prepared some for demoing, so we're going to open this one up. And kind of the core principle of Deepnote is the notebook. That's kind of the heart of the Deepnote platform. And this is kind of like your Jupyter notebook, right? You have your markdown cells. You also have code cells, right? So I can easily type Python in this case. But what we did is we took kind of this Jupyter experience, and we're fully collaborative with Jupyter. But we took this Jupyter experience and we kind of, we put it on steroids, right? We added a lot of features on top of it that just address all these issues that data scientists always complain about notebooks. So for example, a lot of you have probably seen this already. If you read data set, normally as a data scientist, what you'll do is you'll look at the columns or the data types or the distribution. But we do that all at once so that you can just display your data frame and you can immediately get a summary of the different things. So here I know already that there's 14 unique values to this series. I know the range of my column here. I know that the data types. So I can already get started with my data and I don't have to spend too much time getting to know it. In addition, just like we show a data frame, so I'll show this data frame again, we can actually visualize it really quickly. So you can just go to your Visualize tab. In this case, I'm looking at an unemployment data set. So I can just, let's put the year, or let's put the date here. I'll put the unemployment rate here. And we can see that the unemployment rate has gone up around the time of the recession. And what this means is that, data scientists often complain about not wanting to do visualizations and having to leave it until the very end as kind of this chore that they don't want to do because it slows down their exploration. And this means that you can explore very quickly your data, get insights out of the visualizations, and then keep going with your actual coding exploration. And you don't need to switch back and forth between, let's say, a dashboarding app like Tableau and a coding app like Jupyter. One of the big things we added is it's very easy to read your data. So if you've used Jupyter, you probably recognize some of this code. This is the code that I would need to do to connect to a SQL database. Sorry, here is for BigQuery data warehouse, and this is for a SQL database. It's a lot of code. It's a lot of libraries I have to install. And most importantly, it's also not very secure, right? I would have to include some credentials here that are exposed, and it exposes my own personal password, my own personal username, and my project ID. These are things you don't want to expose in your actual code. The same with SQL. We're exposing a password and a username here. So we actually enable you to very, very quickly connect to your data sets. In this case, I'm already connected to a PostgreSQL data set, to a BigQuery public data set. So, we have all these details. So then you can just easily create, let's say, a BigQuery cell or a PostgreSQL cell and natively query it in SQL. So that's the other kind of main advantage of Deepnote. You can switch back and forth between Python and R and SQL and all these different modalities. So I can actually natively query this, for example, or my RNA data set. So I can do this case, it's some, bioinformatics data set. And great, I can natively query it and I get the same kind of summary that I got before from my Python data frame. But not only that, it's actually saved as a Python data frame automatically. So I can quickly go from this SQL statement to a Python statement. And now I have it in Python, so I can do whatever I want. For example, let's say I did some processing. Now I can save it as a CSV via Python. And there we go. So that's kind of the notebook experience. Again, I saw more people join. What I'm doing is I'm just giving a quick overview of what Deepnote is all about before I dig into some of the new features. And if you are new to Deepnote, you can always reach out to me and get more information about what Deepnote is all about. This is just a quick summary. So yeah, at its core, Deepnote is also collaborative, right? So it's not just about this notebook, it's about how we work together as a team on our data science workflows. So for that, I can go back to the dashboard and I can open up this demo project. And here, let's say I have, just like before, I'm going to read some data and I'm going to plot it right here. And in this case, I actually want to collaborate, right? Let's say I'm a data scientist. I want to send this to our sales engineer because she might be able to use this in her workflow. So I can actually just share this with a team by just going here and adding her as a collaborator. So in this case, I want to share with Elizabeth, but Elizabeth is actually part of my subspace analytics team. So I can actually just take this link, just like you would do, let's say in Google Docs or in Notion. I can take this link, copy it, and then I can, for example, I could send it in the Zoom chat or in, let's see if I can open up the chat here. Well, I'll have to send it to her via Slack, I guess. I guess you can't see my screen at the moment, can you?
We can see our Deepnote dashboard.
Okay. Oh, you still see the Deepnote. All right. Cool. So I just send it to Elizabeth as a Slack message, and Elizabeth can now come on, so I can see her icon. And let's say so it looks like she's making some changes. It looks like she doesn't want it to be false. She wants it to be true. And she ran again. That makes sense because now we have a linear relationship. So that's an example of how we can collaborate as a team. I gave her a visualization that I wanted her to check out. It looks like she wants a visualization like that. I can add a comment that, she can take the comment, and now we can actually work together as a team and kind of leverage our team benefits. And just like we had integrations before, I actually have integrations as a team. So Elizabeth also has access to all these data sets that I connected to, and she's also able to use them so she can see them and actually operate on them. Right, so that's an overview. I showed you kind of the notebook experience. I showed you kind of this dashboard and kind of my team and the different members on the team, for example. In this case, we have Jakub, who created the team. We have the viewers and the members. We have Daniel is also on the call. He's a viewer, so he can only see the code. He can't edit it, and that's great if he just wants to see the insights. He doesn't have any interest in the actual code. Right, let's see what's new, what we worked on in the last few weeks. That might be interesting to a lot of you who are existing users. The first thing we did is I have a demo project here. And just like before, I'm going to do some SQL on a public data set. This is actually a really fun data set. It's very random. It's a list of kind of all the trees on the streets of San Francisco. So if I read this, I'm looking at all the trees from 2010 onwards that were planted from 2010. And here I have a list. I limited it to 3,000. There's a lot of trees in San Francisco. A list of 3,000 trees that were planted in from 2010 onwards. And here my task is I want to see how many trees were planted per year. So I can do what I showed you before. I have this data frame saved as trees. And now I can go into Python. And just to reiterate, here's my Python data frame. And now, personally, every data scientist has their own preference about the line between SQL and Python and where they want to stop using SQL and when they want to transition to Python. For me, this is a line. I don't like SQL that much. I prefer to work on Python. This is already something that I would prefer to do on Python. It's not something I want to worry about and do within a SQL query. So I'm going to take this in Python, and I'm going to create a year variable. And now I can this as a count column. And this is my data frame, right? So I did it in Python. I quickly got a data frame of the years and the counts per year. And now I can visualize it just like before. So let's put, yeah. And I can see that this peaked in 2015, for example. It looks like it was really low in 2021, which makes sense because the year is just starting. So none of this is new. What's new is now we allow you to do much more complex workflows with your queries. So what if this was my query now? I don't just want to just look at how many trees were planted per year. Now I want to exclude the 3 most popular trees. I want to look at how many they were planted per year when the caretaker is either a private landowner, or in another case, when the caretaker is the Department of Public Works of San Francisco. And now, you know, if this query was too complex for me in SQL, this is definitely too complex for me in SQL. And now I definitely want to transition back and forth between Python and SQL. So let's deconstruct this. The first thing I want to do is I have 2 cases that I'm worrying about here. One is a private landowner and one is the Department of Public Works. So all we can do is we can actually add an input block. In this case, I'll add a selection and I'll call this caretaker. And we can add different options. So I'm going to add private here. And another option is DPW. And now we have 2 options to select from. And now we can take the query that I had before. So this is the same. Oh, I need a big query block here. So this is the same query that I had before, but now we can add some programmatic kind of templating here. So now I want to tell it to look at this variable, and this is essentially a Python variable. So if I look at this as a Python variable, you can see it's a string called DPW. So I can add this templating, and this is what we added now in the last few weeks. And I'm going to say that the caretaker has to equal the caretaker variable. So now instead of, when I run this, instead of seeing all these different, where is this? Yeah, here. Instead of seeing, currently we have 12 different caretakers. When I run this, we should only have one, which is the DPW, the Department of Public Works. And there we go. Now we have only the Department of Public Works, 3,000 trees that were planted by them since 2010. Any questions? Sorry, I heard some.
Variables in Markdown.
Sorry?
So you use the caretaker variable for your query. I'm wondering, could I have used the caretaker variable in a Markdown cell?
So I don't know if it uses the same mechanism. I don't know if you guys know if it uses the same mechanism, Daniel or Jakub. You can definitely use Python variables within your Markdown. I think you could have done this before. It's not required. Like this new templating wasn't required for it, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Daniel?
So if you're asking about Markdown, I don't think that's possible. So you can't template Markdown or inject Python variables into Markdown. We're definitely thinking about that, but it's not supported right now. What you can do is you can use those Python variables in your SQL.
Okay.
So actually, I'll jump right into this. There's a way how you can use macros in Markdown. It's not exactly straightforward. It's not like you can just create a new Markdown cell and insert a macro, but it can definitely be done. It's like a small hack where you create a new code cell, and you essentially just output a Markdown type, and you'll just render it as a Markdown. So it's not like the most native way, but it can be done. And we are thinking about adding it into the like native Markdown cell. we're actually thinking about adding new kinds of cells over time. So the experience will be even better. But if you want to do it even right now, totally possible. Just, yeah, I think we have it somewhere in the documentation how to do this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're active, if I remember, on Deepnote community. There's, I think, also a post on Deepnote community about this, and if not, we can put one on there. Right. So, all right. So that gets me halfway, right? Now I can switch between DPW and private caretakers, for example. Now I want to exclude the 3 most popular trees. This is where I prefer to use Python. So I'm going to save this as trees, just like before. And I'm going to create a Python cell that, well, first of all, let's copy it so I can keep my old trees data frame. And now I want to look, first of all, how many species there are and how many are there of each species. And here I can see there's a lot of, let's say, of this Brisbane box species, of the swamp myrtle species. I want to exclude these top 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select from the 3rd onwards. And now that it removes the top 3 rows. And now I want to just get the species because I want to save this as kind of a list. So sorry. So let's get the index here. Right. And finally, let's convert this to just a Python list. Right. So these are the species that I want to look at. Let's call them top 3 because I'm excluding the top 3. And now I can go back into my SQL query. So let's take it, add a BigQuery box here. Let's call this trees top 3. And now I'm going to add one more condition here where I'm going to say that species needs to be in top 3. And I need to add kind of a special clause here to just tell that it's a list and not just a Python variable. So here we have, just to confirm, we have 163 species that we're looking at. And here we have 161 species that we're looking at. Sorry, there's 164 species. And then we have 161 species. So it looks like we removed them successfully. And finally, one more time, we can go back into Python. Top 3, and we're going to do the same as before. Now I can visualize it. Just like before, and we can see it's a little bit different, right? Now we see that there's a significant drop from 2019 to 2020. I don't know what happened then. I'm not an expert on the San Francisco tree planting trends, but my guess is that it might have something to do with the COVID pandemic, for example. Great. So what we basically did is now we allowed you to seamlessly transition not just from SQL to Python, but to go from Python to SQL and back to Python and back to SQL. And this allows you to do some really complex queries and get your insights very quickly. So that's kind of the big thing that we added. I think this was a week or 2 ago. Are there any questions on that? Otherwise, I can move on to another addition. Right. Okay. So by the way, I can't see the chat for some reason. So if Elizabeth, if somebody's writing in the chat, just let me know. I don't have the actual Zoom chat open.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I'll let you know if there's any questions.
Yeah. So yeah. And now what else did we add? Well, if you are familiar, let me find the right demo here. So we have kind of this versioning feature, right? Where, where, you know, as I edit my notebook, I can always see kind of the previous historical edits that were made. In this case, it's kind of an old notebook, so it was kind of a month ago. So here we have March 17th. Here's another one in March 18th. And if you're familiar with this, you might have seen this before. This is not really new, this view here. We also have kind of snapshots that are, again, kind of old. Like you could always go back to, let's say, a version from 1 month ago and restore it. And this way you can kind of go back in history. But it turned out a lot of users weren't using this functionality. And that's because we didn't have this kind of core issue that a lot of people have with notebooks. And the issue there is to actually see the difference between notebooks, the notebook that I have today compared to the notebook that I had a month ago. And this is why we added kind of this diffing feature, which is something that you can't get with Git, for example. So here I can look at previous snapshots. I can look at current ones and compare those, and I can see the different changes that I made. So then I can then I can know whether I actually want to revert backwards or not. Why is this useful? For a few reasons. First of all, it's just useful if you want to, if you made a mistake and you want to go backwards in time and see the changes. But it's also very useful for collaborators, for teams working together. If teams are working together, you want to have some transparency about the changes that were made and who made them and when. Now we could do comments like I showed you before. I can add comments to cells, but ideally you also want to have just an historical kind of log of what the changes were made historically, going back to the beginning of the project and the beginning of the notebook. Finally, if a lot of you are actually integrating with GitHub, for example, in this case, this is actually a Git repo, so I can open this in a terminal. Yeah, sorry. So it looks there are some changes made, and I guess you're used to this. If you do a git diff, this is what it looks like to do a git diff on a Jupyter notebook. It's not really useful because Jupyter or Git treats a notebook as kind of this raw file with different cells, and actually seeing what code was changed within these is really not fun. So what this allows you to do is to go to your history to see what changes were made. Here I can see that it looks like gigawatts was changed to megawatts, for example. And therefore, if I wanted to keep using Git, some of our users choose to just use Deepnote for the versioning. But let's say you want to integrate with your existing kind of Git repo, then you can go into your terminal. And then when you do a git commit, you know that it was changed to MWH. So now you actually know what to put in your commit instead of, I don't know what you put, but I tend to just do some sloppy commit like update notebook. And that's not really useful for people working as a team. It's also not useful for yourself when you want to see what changes you made in the past. So that's kind of the big change. Now you can finally see the difference between notebooks. So those are the two big ones that we changed, two big features that we added in the last 2 or 3 weeks. There's a few that happened before that I can go over if we have time, but I think I'll just open it up to you guys to see if there's any other questions lingering there. Okay. Yeah, so, and by the way, we allotted an hour for this. My guess is we're gonna finish up in about 5 minutes or so. One thing I wanted to go over, because I got a lot of questions about this, and I see one user asked about this before in the past in the chat, is about how to create different notebook environments. And some of this is kind of old, some of this is relatively new, but I thought I would go over this again. So first of all, why do you want to maintain kind of consistent environments in your notebook? This is an example of a notebook that was shared with me. And this is an example of issues with reproducibility, because if I try to run this notebook, this might take some time to start the hardware, but what will happen is this is using some libraries that are pre-installed, right? So matplotlib, that's pre-installed. but GeoPandas is not pre-installed, and it looks like I don't have it. And what will happen is you will try to install GeoPandas, for example, and we have like a nice button for you to do that. But you know, now I could run this. I'll probably need to also install map classify. Right, so now I installed both of these and I'm ready to use this. But this is where issues of reproducibility come in. Because now I can run this and this looks quite beautiful and everything, but if I send this to somebody else and they have to restart the hardware, they're not gonna have these libraries that I just installed because they were installed as a one-time ad hoc library. And this is why you wanna maintain consistent environments that you can reuse and make sure that you have these libraries from now on. One way to do that is, you know, the simplest way is to move this to a requirements.txt file. So I can just click here automatically and it will move this and this to a requirements.txt file. That's quite simple. That already gets me, let's say 80% of the way there, because it means that from now on, when I restart the hardware, it's going to automatically install whatever is in this requirements.txt file. Why does it do that? Because I have an init.ipynb notebook. There's a special notebook that runs whenever you restart the hardware, and it's just going to install whatever is in the requirements.txt file. And that's, for 80% of you, that's good enough. This is already a great way to just make sure that you have consistent environments whenever you restart your hardware. But especially if you're working on a team, even if you're working alone, it's not fun to always reinstall this these libraries, right? You don't want to wait for them every time the hardware starts, that it needs to install GeoPandas, it needs to install map classify. Let's say you're using a big library like OpenCV, you'll have to reinstall that every time you restart the hardware. So what we do is we can actually enable you to leverage the fact that all of these notebooks are running on a Docker container. And because they're running on a Docker container, you can actually modify the Docker image that the container is running off of. So for that, you can go into your environments, and instead of picking kind of our default environments like Python or R, you can pick a local Docker file. And then you can use this Docker file. And now you can do a run pip install GeoPandas. And, you know, I'll have to build this. This will take some time, so we probably won't wait until the end. But what happens is now you can build it once, and you see it's building right here. And once it builds, you will never have to wait for it to install ever again. And from now on, when you open this project, you are going to automatically use this environment that we set here, which is our Docker file. And you're specifying in this Docker file, we don't even need this requirements.txt file anymore. You're specifying in this Docker file that you want to have GeoPandas installed, which means that it'll always be ready for you from now on without having to wait. Finally, if you are working on a team, you probably have your own Docker images that you're using. If you have your own Docker images that you're using, you can actually use them and import them into Deepnote. You don't need to create your own again. And to do that, what you can do is, one, you can use a public Docker file. So you can go a public Docker image, sorry. So you can set up a new Docker image and you can reference it here. In this case, we could do Deepnote / Python, you know, whatever it's called. I don't remember the name. But you could also do private Docker images. And what you would do is you would actually connect to Docker Hub or to GCR or to Amazon Elastic Container Registry. You could go into the integration menu just like before, and you would add these integrations. And then from then on, you can specify these private images. So then you can actually have some sensitive content that you don't want to expose in your notebook. You could add it to your Docker images. So then, for example, you could have API credentials listed in these Docker images. So then you can use them and you don't need to worry about them being exposed. So yeah, we're improving our documentation to make this kind of better documented, because we noticed that a lot of you are being confused by kind of the different ways to do this. But I thought that for now, I would just give you a quick rundown of how to do it as we kind of improve the messaging around it. Right, okay. You're a quiet crowd. I don't hear any questions. Lastly, I thought I'll give you a sneak preview. To be honest, I didn't prepare this because this is quite new. Just a sneak preview of what is already launched, but what is about to get a lot better. one of these things is visualization cells made by our very own Daniel, where, just like I visualized these with kind of this, I had a data frame preview and a visualization. We actually have some nicer visualizations now. So I can take this, I think this is the right one. So I can take this trees data set. I can pick my x-axis here. I can automatically aggregate it into counts. I don't need to actually manually do that. And now I can see literally per date how many trees were planted. I can even get some nice, tooltips and some coloring with a legend. So we can color this by species. This might look a little bit ugly. Yeah, so we can see, how many species were planted in this date compared to a lot of, what is this tree? In this date. Right, and that, Andrew, you were asking about this. That's an example of how we're moving towards turning Deepnote into more production-based workflow. So you're not just doing data exploration, but you can actually turn this into production. How? Well, for now, you can have some nice visualizations finally. So you can actually send this to people who are not coders, and they can see these visualizations, and they don't need to worry about the code behind it. But in the future, what we're adding, doesn't exist yet, but what we're adding, as in this wasn't launched yet, we're adding an ability to schedule notebooks. Scheduling notebooks means I can quickly turn this on. I can tell that I want it to run every day or every week. Let's say every week at 8:20 in the morning, every Thursday, let's say. And I can tell it to notify me when it finished running, and can even have it email me a PDF or email one of my teammates a PDF of what's going on. And this means that finally we can turn this into a production environment. So for example, you can imagine that I can generate some really nice visualizations that can represent, let's say I'm a tree planter. I want to see how many trees were planted or about to be planted in next week. I can get some consistent insights on how many trees are about to be planted, and I can get these weekly PDFs sent to my email. And that's kind of one step that we're starting to take in terms of turning this into a production-ready data science workflow.
So I have a slightly annoying question to ask you. So my slightly annoying question is this: do you have any updates on using libraries like pandas profiling and SweetViz and that sort of thing?
Pandas profiling. What was the other one?
SweetViz. There are a few libraries in Python that allow you to do automated EDA. SweetViz is one. Python profiling is another one. And there are two that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I thought right now, Deepnote doesn't support IPython widgets. So I'm wondering if you have any progress on that, or if that is still,
yeah. So I don't remember the exact blockers for profiling, but if one of them is IPyWidgets, then we are getting rid of that blocker. I don't know if that's launched yet. If not, it's launched very soon, which is just supporting IPyWidgets. I don't have a demo for that prepared, to be honest, because I didn't want to kind of get your hopes up before this is fully launched. But IPyWidgets and any libraries that depend on them will be able to run quite soon.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I believe actually Daniel here is the person who's working on IPyWidgets. So maybe he can give us a quick intro. Like, what's the status of that?
Right. Yeah, they want to jump in because what Ito said was mostly correct. But yes, IPyWidgets are in works. It's a rather tricky feature, which we're playing around with for quite some time to get it right. But we are pretty close to something that we can actually deploy. So something that you can use should be out. I can say soon because the code is still being written, but hopefully it's not too far from getting shipped.
I think by tomorrow you'll have it.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
No, I'm joking.
Okay. Oh man, you can't do this to me, man.
No, but yeah, it's one of the, we have a list of the requested features. It's definitely one of the more highly ranked ones. So we're aware that it's a blocker for some of you. So we're definitely working hard on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, please definitely do let us know of any libraries that you'd prefer us to support in a community, so we can keep track of that, and also we can test them before we actually launch this.
Sure.
Right. I didn't want to go up until the end of the hour, so I think we'll stop it soon. I'll just say, what you can do now. If you haven't tried Deepnote out yet, try it out. If you have tried Deepnote out and you are a consistent user, then try these new features that we showed you, especially this visualization feature. I'm excited to hear your feedback because it's, this is a V1 and we're working to get a V2 out on this and to make it, more beautiful and more, snappy. So try it out. Give us feedback. If you don't know, you have a chat feature in your bottom left of your Deepnote notebook. You can always give us feedback there. But ideally, join community, give us feedback there. We're kind of a baby community at the moment, right? We have about 100 engaged users every day or so, which is nice, but we want to get it up to 1,000 or 5,000. So we want you on community and to just share your inputs there. And you'll see it's getting better and better. More people are posting their work. There's some memes on there that it's getting fun. So I think I would recommend the best way to get, also it's a good way to get the entire team to see your suggestions, right? Instead of just one person who's on the chat at that moment, you can see the entire team. You can get the entire team's feedback right away. So I would go on community and then try it there.
If I may
right.
have one more comment on the community. So also like the features like IPy widgets, visualization cell scheduling, those are all features that we first test internally and then release it to the public version. So if you would like to be a beta tester for one of these features, all you have to do is just like either DM us in the community, the link is in the chat right now, or just like post that and we'll make sure to include you and flip the flag for you so you can be an early beta tester.
Yeah, and maybe one more benefit of the community is that, well, we all are hanging out over there. So if you have any questions about what is planned on the roadmap, if you want to persuade us or convince us to add some feature that is not on the roadmap, that's actually the perfect place to start a discussion, because yeah, it's very likely that more people will raise their hands as well and join the discussion, and we'll be able to prioritize this. And maybe some of the things that you will also find there as about like talking about kind of the vision of the product and where we are taking it. So maybe I can say a few words regarding that. You have seen what Deepnote can already do. What are the things that you can achieve with Deepnote? And Deepnote already is pretty powerful. Like you can go, you can sign up, and you can do quite a lot of work with like very, very high ceiling, meaning you can do pretty much almost everything that you can do in any other IDE, except you can do it much faster in a much more intuitive environment, and you can also share it with your team and just in general make it much more pleasant experience. And these are the things that we really care about. So when we were starting out Deepnote, we knew that data science by itself, it's not just limited to a select few data scientists in a company. We knew that data should really, like access to data should really be kind of democratized across the company. So right now, the tools that we are used to, all the IDEs, all the code editors, Jupyter and so on, they were not exactly built for people who don't have the technical background. But I don't think that needs to be the case forever. We are actually building a tool that makes you as a data scientist radically more proactive with all these features that we are talking about. Like suddenly like running jobs on huge machines becomes super easy with just like one click. Combining all these types of SQL queries from like BigQuery, Redshift, Snowflake, Postgres, it's just like a very nice and pleasant experience. If you want to build some like dashboard, like scheduling and all these things, that like all of these things can be done in Deepnote while having like all these more advanced features with, let's say, autocomplete and maybe over time some debuggers and so on. But that's just like one element of what we're trying to do. Like, aside just from making you personally more proactive, we really want to make sure that you are like the data science team within the company is never a bottleneck for anything. We really want to make it so that anyone can jump into the notebooks that you produce, and people can consume them just as they are used to, for example, consuming all these Google Docs or Google Sheets. It's really, we are aiming for a very nice and pleasant experience, even if you don't have technical background. You should still be able to see what is inside the notebook, see where this data coming from, maybe tweak some small SQL query, or just play around with visualizations. So the upcoming features are going to be mostly targeted around these kinds of use cases, as well as we are going to be allowing bigger and bigger deployments. If you have, for example, stricter privacy, security, like compliance requirements within your company. These are the things that we are currently working on. So if there are any questions regarding how we are deploying Deepnote, like where the data is stored, these are the things that we are going to, well, just give you many more options over the next few months.
Right. Okay. Okay, cool. So like I said, this is the first time we're doing this demo. We're going to iterate on how long it will take, what we're going to talk about over and over. And ideally, there should be new content every few weeks so that we're ready to give you a demo and it actually stays fresh. So if you enjoyed this one, or if you didn't enjoy this one, come back for the next one. And hopefully you can keep getting more insights about the product.
I just posted mine and Ito's emails into the chat. So if you please have any feedback on how we can make this better, or whether it makes sense to do it at all, please let us know and we'll take that down.
Right. Okay. So thank you all. And see you next time, and hopefully hear